From drag strips to dirt trails, Suzuki has built some legendary motorcycle engines over the decades. The Japanese manufacturer has given us smooth powerhouses that rack up hundreds of thousands of miles and experimental disasters that barely made it past the first year. Today we're breaking down the 3 absolute worst and 4 absolute best Suzuki engines ever made for driving. Let's dive straight into our countdown. Starting at 3 on our worst list, we have the Suzuki TM400 Cyclone from 1971. This 400cc 2-stroke single-cylinder was built for motocross, and it earned a reputation that still makes riders nervous today. The engine used an 82mm bore matched with a 75mm stroke, pushing out 40 horsepower through an air-cooled design. Suzuki equipped it with PEI ignition and a 5-speed transmission, aiming to dominate the dirt racing scene. This was ambition meeting engineering, and the results were anything but predictable. The problem started the moment riders twisted the throttle. Power delivery came on like flipping a light switch, sudden and violent. The engine would cruise along normally, then explode with force that could snap the front wheel off the ground without warning. This was explosive, unpredictable, dangerous. The 2-stroke design created massive surges that happened unpredictably, making the bike incredibly dangerous on rough terrain. US dirt tracks amplified every issue because riders couldn't predict when the engine would unleash its power. You needed nerves of steel and reflexes to match just to keep this thing pointing forward. Reliability was another major concern. The TM400 suffered from constant misfires that left riders stranded mid-race. The frame had a tendency to crack under the stress of that explosive power delivery, and at 240 pounds, the bike was surprisingly heavy for its class. Maintenance became a constant battle as components wore down from the harsh vibrations and sudden power spikes. Motocross Action magazine called it one of the worst bikes ever raced, and riders who tested it on YouTube confirmed its fearsome reputation. When you compare it to something like Yamaha's DT400, which offered much better control and smoother power, the TM400 falls short in every category that matters for actual riding. This was a machine that demanded respect through fear, and that is never the right approach. Moving to number 2 of the worst is the Suzuki RE5 from 1974, represents one of the most ambitious failures in motorcycle history. This was Suzuki's attempt at using rotary engine technology, inspired by NSU's Wankel design. The single rotor setup had an equivalent displacement of 497 cubic centimeters and produced 62 horsepower with 55 pound-feet of torque through a 5-speed gearbox. The engine used both liquid and oil cooling systems, and the carburetor alone had 5 separate cables running to it. Complexity defined this machine, and complexity became its downfall. The engineering was overwrought. Those dual cooling systems meant 3 different oil reservoirs that constantly leaked. Heat management was terrible, with the rotary design generating so much thermal energy that summer rides in the US became genuinely uncomfortable. The engine would vibrate heavily above 4,000 RPM, which defeated the whole point of using a rotary since they're supposed to be smooth. Acceleration was disappointing too, hitting 60 miles per hour in about 6 seconds, which wasn't competitive for a bike of this size and complexity. This was a solution looking for a problem that didn't exist. Fuel efficiency was abysmal at just 20 miles per gallon, and the emissions were so poor that the RE5 failed EPA testing. This killed production by 1976, just 2 years after launch. Parts became nearly impossible to find, and mechanics who understood rotary engines were rare, even when the bike was new. The maintenance schedule was brutal because of all those interconnected systems. Even collectors avoid this bike today because keeping it running costs more than it's worth. Jay Leno's Garage covered the RE5 and explained how both the cost and performance issues doomed it from the start. When you put it next to Honda's rotary experiments, which also failed but at least tried to fix the fundamental problems, the RE5 stands out as overcomplicated, underperforming, unreliable. This was innovation without execution, ambition without results. At our top spot for the worst, we have the Suzuki TL1000 from 1997, available in both S and R variants. This 996 cubic centimeter V-twin used a 90-degree configuration with a 98mm bore and 66mm stroke, pumping out 125 horsepower and 78 pound-feet of torque. The engine was liquid-cooled and fuel-injected, designed to take on Ducati's legendary 916. On paper, everything looked perfect for a high-performance street bike. On the road, reality told a different story. That low-end torque was absolutely thunderous, giving riders massive pull from just above idle. The problem was how Suzuki packaged this engine into the chassis. They used a rotary rear damper instead of a traditional shock, and this setup made the bike incredibly twitchy at speed. The handling became so unpredictable that riders nicknamed it the Widowmaker. US highway riding exposed every flaw because the bike would weave and wobble in ways that felt dangerous at 70 miles per hour, let alone when pushing toward its top speed. This was power without control, performance without stability. Suzuki had to issue recalls for damper failures, which tells you how serious the problems were. Cam chain tensioners wore out prematurely, requiring expensive fixes. The engine ran hot, leading to overheating issues, especially in warm climates. Frame cracks developed on bikes that saw regular use, and electrical problems plagued aging models. The resale value tanked because buyers knew about the handling issues and expensive maintenance. Forums like TL Zone are filled with owners discussing the constant repairs needed to keep these bikes running safely. When you compare it to the Aprilia RSV Mille from the same era, which used a similar V-twin concept but executed it properly, the TL1000 shows how a powerful engine means nothing if the whole package doesn't work together. Some riders loved the raw torque and took the time to modify the suspension, but in stock form, this engine contributed to one of Suzuki's most problematic motorcycles. This was potential squandered by poor execution. Now we get into the good stuff. By the way, if you too love motorcycles and are having fun, drop a like and subscribe. At number 4 for the best engines, the Suzuki DRZ 400 single-cylinder has been proving itself since 2000. This 398 cubic centimeter DOHC design uses a 90mm bore with a 62.6mm stroke, delivering 39 horsepower and 29 pound-feet of torque. The engine is liquid-cooled and comes with either a carburetor or fuel injection depending on the model year. Suzuki paired it with a 5-speed transmission and built the whole package for dual sport use, meaning it had to work on both pavement and dirt. This was engineering for the real world, built to take punishment and keep running. The reliability is simply incredible. Riders regularly push these engines past 50,000 miles with nothing but basic maintenance. Oil changes every 1,000 miles keep everything running smooth, and the occasional cam chain issue is about the only thing that ever goes wrong. The engine weighs just 317 pounds wet, making it easy to handle on technical trails. Power delivery is smooth and predictable, which matters when you're navigating rocks or sand. US off-road riders appreciate that this bike can hit 90 miles per hour on highways, but still crawl over obstacles in first gear without stalling. This is versatility backed by bulletproof reliability. The carburetor models do struggle a bit at high altitude where the air is thin, and highway riding creates some vibration that gets tiring on long trips. Modifying these engines is popular and easy because the design is so simple. You can tear down the entire motor with basic tools, which makes repairs cheap even when something does break. Thumper Talk forums are packed with riders who've beaten their DRZ 400s mercilessly and still can't kill them. YouTube reviews consistently highlight the longevity as the main selling point. When you stack it up against Honda's XR400, the Suzuki is tougher and more reliable. KTM's 450 EXC makes more power but requires constant maintenance and costs way more to own. The DRZ 400 hits that sweet spot of being durable enough to survive anything while staying fun to ride every single day. This is what happens when Suzuki builds an engine for riders who actually ride. Coming in at number 3, the Suzuki SV650 V-twin has been a favorite since 1999. This 645cc engine uses a 90-degree V configuration with an 81mm bore and 62.6mm stroke, producing between 70 and 75 horsepower with 47 pound-feet of torque. The redline sits at 12,000 RPM, and the engine uses liquid cooling with fuel injection that meets Euro 5 emission standards. Dual spark plugs help with efficient combustion, and Suzuki uses this same motor in the V-Strom 650 adventure bike, which proves how versatile the design really is. This is an engine that works everywhere, every day, for every rider. The torque curve is perfect for everyday riding. From 3,000 to 6,000 RPM, the engine pulls hard with minimal throttle input, making city commuting effortless. You can cruise in higher gears at low speeds without lugging the engine or needing to downshift constantly. When you want to have fun on twisty roads, the high-rev buzz adds excitement without being overwhelming. US riders consistently report getting over 40 miles per gallon, which makes this engine practical for cross-state trips where gas stations might be spread far apart. This is efficiency meeting performance, practicality meeting fun. Maintenance is where the SV650 really shines. The engine is incredibly DIY-friendly, with easy access to all the major components. Valve adjustments are straightforward, and parts are cheap when you do need them. Riders commonly hit 60,000 miles with zero mechanical issues, and the only recurring problem is occasional rectifier failures that cost maybe $100 to fix. At $7,000 new, this bike delivers more value than almost anything else on the market. Suzuki offers both naked and faired versions, so you can pick the style you prefer while getting the same bulletproof motor. This is legendary reliability at an accessible price. The engine does create some vibration above 7,000 RPM, which is noticeable on long highway rides. Power falls short compared to leader bikes, so passing on the interstate requires planning ahead. These are minor complaints though. Revzilla called the SV650 surprisingly fun for all skill levels, and forums are packed with beginners who learned on this bike and experts who still ride them 10 years later. Team BHP praises the character that comes from the V-twin layout, even with the slight buzz. When you compare it to Kawasaki's Z650 parallel twin, the Suzuki's V configuration delivers more personality and that distinctive sound. Honda's CB650R costs more and requires more frequent maintenance despite having less character. The SV650 engine is proof that you don't need the biggest displacement or highest horsepower to create something that riders genuinely love. This is a masterpiece of practical engineering. At number 2, the Suzuki GSX-R 1000 K5 engine from 2005 represents the peak of supersport engineering. This 999cc inline-4 uses a long-stroke design with a 73.4mm bore and 59mm stroke, creating 178 horsepower at 11,000 RPM and 86 pound-feet of torque. The DOHC setup runs 16 valves with titanium valve construction for reduced weight. Liquid cooling keeps temperatures stable, and fuel injection provides precise metering. Suzuki added a slipper clutch for smooth downshifts, which matters when you're braking hard into corners on a track. This was race-bred technology for the street, performance engineering at its finest. The engine feels like it revs to the moon. Compared to a 600cc Supersport, it spins just as freely, but delivers way more punch everywhere in the power band. The mid-range from 5,000 to 9,000 RPM is where street riding happens, and the K5 pulls hard enough to make every acceleration feel special. Top-end rush above 10,000 RPM is where track days get serious, and riders at places like Laguna Seca rely on this engine's stability at speeds over 150 miles per hour. Vibration is minimal thanks to advanced engine balancing that Suzuki developed through racing. This is smooth power, relentless power, addictive power. Reliability is bulletproof. Owners regularly pass 50,000 miles without needing any internal engine work. Valve adjustments come due every 15,000 miles, but the checks often show everything still in spec. Chain tensioners almost never fail, unlike some competing bikes from this era. In hot US climates like Arizona or Texas, the oil cooler does its job keeping temperatures safe, even during aggressive riding. The dry weight of just 375 pounds makes the whole bike feel nimble, and the K5 won multiple AMA Superbike championships, proving its racing credentials. This is proven performance, championship-winning engineering, unmatched reliability. The ergonomics are quite aggressive, which means your wrists and back will get tired on rides longer than an hour. Early models didn't have ABS, though Suzuki added it in 2017 for newer versions. These are small complaints for a bike this focused on performance. Medium called the K5 one bike to rule them all because of how smoothly it revs, despite the displacement. Reddit users constantly mention the low-end torque that makes wheelies effortless even in higher gears. When you compare it to Yamaha's R1 from the same year, the K5 feels more accessible and easier to ride fast. Honda's CBR 1000RR is equally reliable, but has a rawer feel that some riders find less refined. Used K5s start around $5,000 in the US market, making them perfect for budget track builds or anyone who wants proven supersport performance without spending $20,000 on something new. This is a benchmark engine, a game changer, a legend. The absolute best Suzuki engine for driving is the Hayabusa's 1,340 cubic centimeters inline-4. Introduced in 1999 and enlarged in 2008, this engine changed what hyperbikes could do. The name Hayabusa comes from the peregrine falcon, and Suzuki designed this motor to beat Honda's Blackbird in the top speed wars. The third generation bumped displacement from 1,299 to 1,340 cubic centimeters by lengthening the stroke, using an 81mm bore with a 65mm stroke. Compression ratio is 12.5 to 1, helping the engine produce 196 horsepower at 9,800 RPM and 114 pound-feet of torque at 7,200 RPM. The redline sits around 11,000 RPM, and the whole thing uses liquid cooling with 4 valves per cylinder and sophisticated fuel injection. This is power engineering taken to the absolute limit. Modern versions include SDMS, which is Suzuki's drive mode selector system. This lets you adjust power maps, traction control settings, and even adds a quick shifter for clutchless upshifts. The engine complies with EPA regulations thanks to a catalytic converter, and it still manages to return 35 to 40 miles per gallon on highway trips. Fuel economy drops to about 25 miles per gallon in the city when you're using all that power, but that's expected for an engine of this size. This is efficiency where it matters, power when you need it. The driving experience is what makes this engine legendary. Riders describe the power delivery as smooth as butter, building linear acceleration that feels endless. There's no sudden hit or aggressive surge, just constant pulling force that keeps increasing. This makes the Hayabusa perfect for US drag strips, where consistent launches matter, and equally good for long hauls down Interstate 95, where you need comfort and passing power. Top speed exceeds 190 miles per hour in unrestricted form, though most bikes are electronically limited to 186 miles per hour because of a 2000 gentleman's agreement between manufacturers to stop the speed wars. The mid-range torque is actually more impressive than peak power because you can overtake traffic at any speed without downshifting. Dual counterbalancers eliminate vibration, and the engine's predictability reduces fatigue on rides that stretch into the hundreds of miles. This is relentless performance, comfortable performance, reliable performance. Owners commonly report over 100,000 miles with nothing but routine maintenance. Valve checks are recommended every 15,000 miles, and most of the time they show no adjustment needed. The only recurring issue is stator failures in extremely hot environments like Arizona summers, but this is fixable and not that common. Parts availability through Suzuki's US dealer network means repairs are never a problem. The engine produces 0.34 horsepower per pound in the complete bike, which is an incredible power-to-weight ratio for something this large. Suzuki offers optional luggage systems that turn the Hayabusa into a legitimate touring machine, and the custom scene has embraced this motor for everything from street builds to land speed record attempts at Bonneville Salt Flats. This is versatility. This is power. This is bulletproof reliability. There are some downsides to consider. Fuel consumption under hard acceleration is significant, and the sheer power output can be intimidating for newer riders. Insurance costs more because of the bike's reputation. None of this matters to the people who buy Hayabusas, though. Hot Cars featured riders with 150,000 miles on their odometers who say the bike still pulls exactly like it did on day one. Forums dedicated to this motorcycle are filled with drag racing setups and discussions about maintaining these engines through serious abuse. When you compare the Hayabusa to Kawasaki's ZX-14R, Suzuki's motor offers smoother low-end torque even though the Kawasaki makes slightly more peak horsepower. The US market price sits around $18,000 new, which is actually accessible for what you're getting in terms of performance and reliability. This is the king of hyperbikes, the benchmark for power and longevity, the absolute best Suzuki engine ever built. There you have it. Suzuki has built engines that range from experimental disasters to bulletproof legends over their decades of motorcycle production. The worst examples show what happens when ambition exceeds execution. The best engines prove that reliability and fun can coexist, that power and comfort can live together, that engineering excellence creates machines riders trust for hundreds of thousands of miles.